Awesome. All right, we are going to get started on Agile Idea Qualification Project Initiation. Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us from all around the world. Very excited to be here with you. My name is Sally Olata. You probably know who I am. For those of you that are new to our webinar series, welcome. I'm the Agile expert for the Learning and Education Community of Practice, and we have this Transforming to Agile webinar series. This is a continuation, and I hope that you will go back and listen to some of the other recorded webinars that we've already recorded last time. And I think we have about a couple more to go for this year, and we'll start the series again next year. My background is I'm pretty technical, so I was a software developer, both on the .NET side, the Java side, played a software architect role for several years before I moved over to this side of process improvement and leadership. So let's get started. I first wanted to give all of you an update, since many of you have attended the previous webinars and were probably interested to know, how did my exam go? So many of you know that the PMI-ACP certification just came out on September 15th. Well, your fellow Sally here went and took the exam at 8 o'clock in the morning, first thing in the morning. And I failed miserably, so I just want to announce that I'm canceling all future webinars, including this webinar, and so sad to say goodbye to this community, but I'm obviously not worthy of teaching Agile. Just kidding. That's April's Fool's Day, even though it's not April. No, the exam was not bad at all. It was actually pretty straightforward. For those of you that are using Agile or doing Agile, it will not be difficult. What I did like about it is it was very well-rounded. It did cover a lot of different aspects of the Agile method, not just Scrum, for example. And I have blogged about this, and this is the link. If you go to our community of practice and you just go under community blogs, I think it's even on the homepage right now. If you just go to our lead community of practice, you will also see my recent blog on, if you are preparing, what are some tips. And you can also join this LinkedIn group if you want to discuss this exam further. But just wanted to give you the update because I know a lot of you are interested, and I do appreciate you sending me well wishes for the exam. The only news that I can't give you is whether I've passed or failed. Hopefully I have passed, but because it's in pilot, you don't get the results until December. So let's talk about our course, our life cycle for today. We have been talking about the entire life cycle of Agile, and we've sort of walked through all the way from the beginning of requirements gathering, planning, sizing, estimating. How do we break down and slice requirements into smaller stories? And our last webinar was a day in the life of an Agile team, where we covered this iteration process in more detail. But today, we're actually taking a step way back and going into project initiation. And project initiation, as all of you are familiar with, of course your project management professionals or have the background, is the step that is coming up, the steps that comes up at the very beginning of the project when we're trying to see, is this project even worth doing? How do I initiate it before I can even begin to plan it? So that will be our focus of today, comparing that to regular the regular way that you would do it before compared to Agile and traditional way. So principles of lean development is where I wanted to start with this conversation. Before you can really understand how we optimize our portfolio management process in Agile, you have to understand a little bit about lean, because that's where it comes from. Lean is this concept that we have to start optimizing the whole picture. We need to eliminate waste. We need to build quality in, and so waste elimination really means that work in progress, for example, having multiple projects going on all at the same time, is considered work in progress. And so part of eliminating waste is saying, let me optimize and only work on the highest value projects that we should really focus on. Building quality in means that we are no longer going to look for defects at the end. We are trying to build quality within the process itself. We need to learn constantly and constantly evolve our learning, and of course deliver as fast as possible, engage everyone, and of course continuously inspect and adapt. So some of these lean principles we'll go over as we talk about how Agile approaches idea initiation and idea qualification. And these are 3 books that I just wanted to recommend for you that have the overall view in terms of creating a lean portfolio strategy and enterprise Agile adoption. So one of the problems that we run into today is that it's very hard to measure enterprise capacity. Well, why is it hard to do that? Well, think about it this way. We really are asking the wrong questions. From an Agile perspective, instead of asking which resources are available, we should be asking which teams are ready to pull this deliverable into their backlog. So Agile takes a view that instead of looking at your whole enterprise as just a group of individuals that are matrixed and we pull from them as needed for different projects and slice them and allocate them, we would rather work with teams, solid, stable teams that actually can get work done predictably. They have one stable backlog and they pull from that backlog. The teams are stable, their backlog changes. Their backlog changes based on our requirements, based on the next top priority project. And so instead of looking at the enterprise and deciding, well, which resource am I going to pull or share or allocate from what project to my project, you're really asking a different question. Now, if you like this concept, and we're going to talk about this more, one of our upcoming webinars is on transforming to an Agile PMO. And what is the role of the project management office in creating some of these stable teams and beginning to understand enterprise velocity? So we'll talk more about that. The other question that's probably the wrong question to ask is, how can I have an enterprise view of my resources? Instead of, how can I have an enterprise view of my execution teams? So again, if you were to look at Agile, Agile looks at an organization from a team perspective. How many stable teams do you have executing, and what is their velocity? That's really the question that matters, as opposed to just how many resources do I have in BAs, how many developers do I have, how many testers. When you think about it, none of these functional units actually can deliver any value on their own. It takes a cross-functional service team, business service team, to actually deliver value. So if you are measuring value and measuring how long does it take me to get anything done, you have to focus on creating those service teams, those stable service teams. The other question is, what is our enterprise capacity in terms of resource hours? And from an Agile perspective, we would say, what is our enterprise velocity per quarter? So now that I see these teams that are executing, instead of wondering how many hours is it taking for them to get something done, which really only answers the cost question for you, which of course is important, but how do you know how much value they're delivering? So Agile uses the point system to basically say, here's sort of, relative size points, we call them story points, and here's how many points X team actually got done in this month, for example. If I have 4 teams, and each team is getting about 100 points done per iteration, then that basically means in a month, let's just say, that means that my enterprise capacity is 400 points for that month. So those are just a different way of considering and thinking about looking at enterprise view. And a point is basically a relative complexity, and we'll talk a little bit more as I show you some examples, but remember from our previous webinars, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 are the key points that we use, which are Fibonacci numbers. And they basically just show you that one thing's harder than the other relative to the other one in size. So pushing projects beyond capacity actually causes an organization to slow down. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations today, that is what they do. We sort of create this false illusion of control by getting too many projects done all at the same time. I call it the horizontal backlog problem, or the organizational ADD problem, attention deficit disorder, right? We are trying to get everything done all at the same time. And that pretty much slows us down entirely in terms of getting anything done. I wanted to give you an example here of a pretty fun game that we normally use in our workshops, and it's very real world, and I just used this recently in an executive training, and it's basically the cost of multitasking on our project side. So when you think about this first scenario over here, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different customers, and they all wanted us to write a name for them. So just think of the name as their requirement. And we have this poor developer over here, or consider him the team, if you can see my mouse moving. And this developer had to write those 5 requirements. But what they had to do is they had to multitask. So the rule that we were using here is just, you can't keep any customer waiting. You need to be working on all of these projects all at the same time. And so obviously he's writing an H over here, an E, then jumping over here, J, O, maybe going and doing an A on this project, writing the J on this side. And as you can see, the result is that not one of these names actually gets done early. They all start to slow down and only get done at the very end. Where in this case over here, where we're limiting work in progress, we're actually prioritizing the list and working top down only based on value. This first one, which is Heinrich, which is the author of this, got done very early. And then we switched over to Joanne and got her done early, and then there's Anders, and then there's Jürgen, and then there's Danielle, which means what you're seeing over here is total time to completion is dramatically lower, and return on investment and time to market is actually way better because it's way earlier. Because I recently played this game, I wanted to show you some examples of some of the flip charts. This was where, and I don't know if you can see the text here, but there were some names being written. And when this developer or this team was doing it in a multitasking way, it took 17 seconds to write the first name, 22nd second for the next name, 36 seconds, and 50 seconds total to write all of them. But all of the 4 customers were trying to communicate those requirements at the same time. So because of that, we also experienced a lot of quality defects and issues while we were going through this experience. In the other example, we actually had them say, each customer gets their turn. So customer 1 gives me a requirement, then I jump into customer 2, then I jump into customer 3, then customer 4, then I'll come back to your turn. And this seemed like a very fair way of working as opposed to the who screams the loudest way. And so in this model, the first one got done in 25 seconds, then we had 27 seconds, 23, and 24. They're very similar to each other because we're trying to get all of them done at the same time in a fair way. The last way that we did this, which is the no multitasking, really just focus on your top priority and don't have a horizontal backlog, but actually have a vertical backlog. So we reprioritized and decided that Mary was the top value here, and we got her done. We got that project done all the way, and it took us 5 seconds. Then we switched over to the second project in the row, and it took 9 seconds. When you actually look at the entire time that it took for us to get this done, 23 seconds was the latest project, which was similar to the earliest project in all of our other multitasking scenarios. So the point of this exercise was to show, and this is something that you can play with your executives or your managers, your leaders, that trying to get too much work done all at the same time actually slows down our overall performance. And that if we could just focus on projects at a time, initiatives at a time, it doesn't say that the whole organization can only do one project, obviously. It's based on team capacity. But if you can allow your teams to actually focus on the highest value and get it done, you would actually get a lot more work done faster. So we will talk a lot more about this when we talk about transforming to an Agile PMO in one of our upcoming webinars. So stay tuned for that one if you enjoy this whole enterprise view of projects and resources. Now let's jump into our idea qualification. When we took a look at this before, and this is a picture that I've been sharing over several of the webinars, ideas come through in our organization and they need to be qualified. We need to figure out what are the top ones that are even worth considering. Then we go into project initiation, which is, okay, this idea is worth initiating. Now, let me go through and spend a little bit more time investigating if it's actually worth doing. Then, once you decide that the ideas are actually worth doing, and so the projects were being planned, you start to do planning, probably at the program level, and then decide which team is going to work on what part of the backlog, and then go ahead and do release planning. So think of your orange as a theme, and a theme was a high-level project. Think of the blue as a feature, which is basically we've broken down that initiative into multiple smaller items. So maybe this was the sales project, and one of the deliverables was we wanted sales reports, and then we wanted a sales portal environment, and then we wanted administrative support, admin functions. Those would be features. And then we would take these features and break them down into stories. And if all this terminology is extremely new to you, I would urge you to go back and listen to some of the previous webinars as we have talked about what is a requirement, what is a story, what is a point. So that will be good background for you. But let's say we took one of the features, which is the sales report, and we broke it down into 4 or 5 actual reports that need to be delivered. As a sales rep, I need to view my leads for the last month so that I can track them. That would be an example of a story. And then we basically took those stories and built them into a release plan where we have broken down all of our work into sprints or iterations. Again, using the word sprint or iteration is interchangeable. It means a very fixed time box. It's got to be every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or possibly every 4 weeks. But once we decide on the sprint iteration length, we don't change it again. So the work that we have allocated is highly prioritized and is sliced into these iterations as to come up with a release plan. And when we're actually executing a sprint or an iteration, we then begin to take the work and break it down into tasks. And those tasks are sized into using hours. But the stories themselves that are on the backlog are sized using the point system. And of course, we did a webinar on Agile estimation and planning. So this is the big picture view again, just to catch all of you up in case you are new to what we've talked about in terms of how do we get from a portfolio idea down to all the way to something being implemented. So the question that we have to ask ourselves now is what makes an idea worth initiating? So when you're looking at idea qualification, you're probably thinking about that. We can't just work on every idea because people are always brainstorming new concepts and new ideas that need to get done. And if you allow all of them to come through your pipeline, then you're going to flood your organization with too many projects beyond their capacity, and it's going to reduce your effectiveness and ability to even deliver on your high-value projects. So you want to start filtering out ideas, and I hate to say it this way, but you got to kill the ideas early if they're not worth investigating, or at least reprioritize them and put them in the right place. So why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do an idea if whatever idea comes up? Let's just say the manager of the marketing department comes up with this great new portal that he wants to see. Well, it should, number one, align with a strategic direction. Every organization needs to define what are the value buckets. What is driving that organization? Is it, and sometimes it's several value buckets, and I'll show you an example of that. Is it because we want to generate money? Is it because we want operational efficiency and reducing cost? Is it possibly we work on something because it is mandatory, it's a mandate, or something that's a legal compliance? So there's different options for aligning with strategic direction, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. The other reason for doing this idea is, does it deliver measurable value or is it pie in the sky? Delivering measurable value means that both you, the person who's qualifying the idea, and the product owner or the business lead who's justifying it needs to have a very clear definition of, here's the exact value that I think this project is going to deliver. What we've been doing before is we write all this up in the business case, just enough to get it approved, and then no one ever comes back and even looks at this was even real or not. It was just a story we had to put together to get the project qualified. Another reason for possibly doing the idea might be because it's low-hanging fruit. Maybe it delivers a lot of value for a very little effort. So with just only 20% of the effort, we can actually get 80% of the value. And of course, you could have several other reasons why an idea is worth doing. Some of the conditions for success that I wanted to share with you from an Agile perspective for qualifying the idea is, does it have measurable value? In some cases it's ROI, in some cases it's not. You know, improving customer satisfaction, or improving employee satisfaction, or reducing risk because we're going to be compliant. Some of these are also very valuable reasons for doing something, and it doesn't relate down to bottom line dollars. If you do not have a committed business owner, which we also call a product owner in Agile, if you don't have a committed person who is willing to engage and see this idea to completion, you should kill it right away. And I know that sounds like it's too harsh, but quite frankly, that's why we spend a lot of dollars, because we have a lot of business ideas that are being initiated without anyone from the business actually seeing it through, taking ownership, being part of the process. And no one is saying that they have to be 100% engaged, but they should be engaged. And the team and they should define what the right level of engagement is. But of course, there is a minimum level of engagement, and it can't just be stopping in once a month to see how things are going. If I was building a home for you, for example, and I was a builder, and this was your project, you would probably be coming down to look at that house every day, if not every other day, just to see how the project is going. And the reason you would do that is because it's your own money, and you care about success, and you want to make sure if there's any problems that you find them early. Well, we need the same kind of commitment from whoever the business idea genius is. So we need a committed product owner or a committed business lead. The idea should probably be feasible. If it's using technology, or it is so expensive, or it needs resources that we don't even have the capacity for right now, there's no feasibility to even get it done, then we should probably rethink if we really want to do that idea. And of course, we did talk about capacity. So an example of the buckets that I was just telling you about, the buckets of value that you could use within your own organization, and this is a cheat sheet that you can download. At the end, I've got a link for you to download the presentation, which is obviously going to be out on the PMI, the lead website, but in addition to that, some other valuable downloads like this cheat sheet. Some of the buckets that you could consider for your organization is, for example, does this idea generate money for me? Does it save us money? Is it going to reduce our cost or something? Does it improve customer satisfaction or improve competitiveness? Are we doing it because of compliance reasons? Another bucket that I just heard from an organization last week was, it's called Foundation, Keeping the Lights On. We're doing this because if we don't do it, we have risk of losing support, for example, for the platform that we're on. So it's like we have to do this even just to survive with the current business that we have. So it's almost the keep the lights on. Once you decide on what these buckets are for your organization and what's valuable to you, you should probably put a different weight on the buckets that are more important. So for example, here, the bucket which is generating money was a ×2. It means it has double weight in our decision compared to the other buckets, which means that for this idea, let's say the one that's in this sample is our ability to accept PayPal payments. So that's an idea, a feature, something that someone wants to implement. When we take it through here, does it generate money for us? Yep, it generates medium value. We're not going to make a lot of money, but we're not going to make little money because we also do accept other kind of credit card payments. So PayPal would be medium value to us. So we would give it 20 points of value in this bucket, but because it's a ×2, that would be 40 points of value. Does ability to accept PayPal payments, does it save us any money? Well, in this case over here, we said no, it doesn't actually really save us any money. We're really doing it more to generate money and to improve satisfaction. So let's go into this one. Does it improve satisfaction? And let's just say it's light. Because our customers today can pay via credit card and other methods, then just the ability to accept PayPal payment would be of light value. So that gives us another 10 points. And of course, if you were doing this in your company, you should associate some dollar amount with these buckets. So what does light value actually mean? Maybe if it's less than 50,000 or 50 to 100,000, it's light. If it's 200 to 500, whatever your numbers are for generating money and saving money, and what number is it for customer satisfaction? Do we need to do this from a compliance reason? And the answer is no. So we don't need to do the accepting of a PayPal payment for compliance. So basically we have 50 points now as we walk through these buckets. 50 points would put it into medium high value. So compared to some of the other features or requirements or projects, this would be of medium high value. This is just an approach and it's just a sample. You don't have to use it as is. But I've used this very successfully with a lot of organizations, a lot of teams, to very quickly get through the business prioritization question, comparing two ideas against each other and walking them through our own buckets of value, and then deciding, and if it's like a 35 or a 50 or a 75, then I would still keep that number. I would still keep that it's a 70 or an 80 or 90, but still drop it in the bucket that makes the most sense so you can compare it against other ones. So this is an idea of how can you begin to almost assign business value points to some of your projects and initiatives. And if you begin to do this, then I'll show you how you can also begin to track a burn-up chart. And the burn-up chart is now measuring the value that we're delivering in every iteration, in addition to the points that we're delivering in every iteration. Here is an example of an idea qualification checklist. This was a flip chart that I also had put up recently. And for example, When we're going through an idea, these are the checklist questions that you would ask. Does it align with a strategic objective, which is one of the buckets that we just talked about? Does it actually deliver measurable value? For example, we can't just say, oh, this is going to improve customer satisfaction. Oh, our sales are really going to increase because of this. That's not measurable. That's very subjective. So what exactly is the percentage of sales increase that you are going to deliver? How exactly do you want to measure customer satisfaction, and what do you expect it to be up to? When you say something's going to reduce cost, by how much? What research have you done to prove? So it really needs to have a little bit more data than just, oh, this is going to be really good for us. Is there the right committed product owner? And we've added this because someone made a very good comment to me, Michelle Lee, and said it's not just a committed product owner, we need the right committed product owner. And so the right committed product owner is a product owner or a business lead who is knowledgeable of the area, the business matter, who is empowered to make decisions, and who is highly engaged with the team. If you're getting a product owner or a business lead who is not actually empowered or engaged, or is just a proxy, is just someone representing someone else, then you need to be more careful, because there really is the real stakeholder out there, the person who's really making decisions, and you're not actually talking to them. So chances are you're going to be missing some of their expectations. That's why having the right product owner is absolutely critical to your success in Agile, and in my opinion, in even non-Agile projects. Does it have a clear definition of done? And this goes back again to measurable value. So I've been on a lot of projects that are too high level. I don't think the product owner or the sponsor or anyone really has a very clear vision of, when this project is done, here's the 5 or 6 things I expect to actually see. Consider them project level acceptance criteria. That does need to be defined. Can it deliver value within 3 to 6 months? This is the big shocker for a lot of people, because I know you're probably working on a lot of projects that are multi-year projects. So here's the deal. No one's saying that you can't bring this kind of idea to be qualified. And maybe your company can approve the vision, the beautiful vision, and maybe the roadmap for a project that is 1, 2, 3 years in length. But the only funding you should receive is for your actual deliverable that you could show us value in 3 to 6 months minimum. So if you can deliver value before that, in a few months, then that's even better. But if a project is going to take more than 3 to 6 months to show anything, and I'm even just talking about the foundation, or talking about laying the groundwork, or maybe at least delivering something of value that we could use, then it's probably a higher risk idea. And from the Agile spirit, we need to start breaking these things down into smaller chunks that could actually show value. And that's the way that we reduce our risk, is we really force it to go into some smaller chunks of deliverables. Now, I do understand that there's sometimes some system replacement projects that are pretty large because you can't replace any part of it until the whole thing is done. I've heard that that's one of the problems that some companies have run into. I would still say there's got to be some part of that system that can be delivered, maybe not being used in production, but maybe we can at least begin to pilot it alongside with the other system to see if we're actually getting anything done. Projects that take too long to deliver any value are high-risk projects. Is it feasible? Technology, skills, and risks. And did it get enough confidence votes? So even after you go through all of this, whoever is the steering committee for idea qualification could still vote that they don't have enough confidence that this idea will succeed. Now, this probably seems like it's way too much to do at the beginning, but you're doing it because, trust me, you do not want a ton of ideas to be going through and bogging down the rest of the valuable projects. You really do want to qualify and only work on ideas that are worth doing. Here's an example of a Kanban wall that you could use for your idea qualification. So if you have never seen a Kanban wall before, I'll just explain it to you. It's very easy to understand. Basically, every part of the process becomes a column. So over here you can see that we have 2 different stores, 2 different initiatives, or 2 different ideas that are waiting to be qualified. Our first step in the qualification is value justification, and we just talked about that. Is this valuable? Is it not valuable? Is it even worth doing? What kind of exact measurement of value will we have? You move it at this line over here. If it's rejected, it did not pass, so it looks like we do have one initiative right now that's been rejected because of value. And if it is accepted, so it's past the value justification, we would move it down to this line over here, which is the green check line. This means that now it's waiting for a feasibility assessment. Once it's down over here, the next team that's helping doing the feasibility assessment, which could be the same team, will move it up and say, all right, we're going to be working on the feasibility assessment right now. So once they're working on the feasibility assessment and they're done with that, if it passed the feasibility assessment, it would go down over here. If it didn't pass, it would be right over here, and it would not pass anymore, so it would be X'd out. And this picture is not showing correctly. It needs to be up over here. So then I would take it into the vote, the confidence vote. Did it pass the confidence vote? And if it did, it would go down over here, and basically it's moving to approved for initiation. So a Kanban wall is a really simple way to show, here's the steps in my process, and here's how I'm tracking it visibly. It's a wonderful place to have all of your stakeholders and your steering committee visibly track what is going on within the organization in terms of ideas that are being initiated or qualified. And the numbers that you see here is what we call a work in progress limit. It means that only one idea can be in this column at any given time. And it looks like for our idea backlog column, we could have up to 3 at any given time. So we actually have place for one more idea to stay over here in the backlog waiting to be qualified. So when you are going into idea initiation, some of the things that you might consider doing is coming up with a vision statement. What is this about? What is this idea? What is your vision? What are you hoping to accomplish from it? And one of the Agile techniques that I wanted to share with you is something called Design the Box. It's one of the innovation games. And if you haven't looked or heard about innovation games, it's basically games, it's called serious play. It's games that we play, they're very fun, they're very engaging, but they're actually really real. And they actually result in a lot more collaboration and probably much better input than traditional ways of gathering requirements and doing collaborative work. So the front of the box, in this case, you're going to think of your project or your initiative as a box. And this box has very limited space for you to sell this idea. So you're going to have to do everything in your power to really shorten down the description and figure out, why should someone buy this product from you? So the front of the box would have the product name or your project name. It would have some sort of a pretty picture on what it's about. And then give me 3-4 key selling points. This is the why we are doing this. Considered project objectives. So you normally write project objectives anyway. You would write them over here at the front of the box, and that's the why we're doing this. A lot of people get confused between why we're doing this and what we're doing. Don't be confused. The why is the value that you're going to deliver. The what is what are you actually going to deliver in terms of features and enhancements. That is what we put in the back of the box. So in the back of the box, put the description of the product, the list of actual requirements or the big deliverables, and if you have any operational requirements. Here's an example from my friend Michelle Lee. This is a CSO project, so consumer sales overhaul. So this could apply to any industry. Basically a company who's looking at overhauling their sales process so that it's more integrated. The value that they're promising here for this project is there's going to be elimination of dual entry, accurate reporting and comprehensive statistics, and it will be one-stop shop for the sales reps. Instead of using multiple systems, multiple marketing, CRM, going all over the place to track their sales and leads, they'll have one place to go. And you would do this with your collaborative product owner, business lead sponsor, just up on a whiteboard or using flip charts. You would just let them know that we're just trying to design our box here in the very simplest way possible. The back of the box is the description of what the project is about and what is it going to deliver. So an example over here is this consumer sales project is a user-friendly, seamless application that provides continuity for the consumer sales organization to maximize the use of existing sales tools. So it's integrating a lot of their current sales tools into one. And what am I going to get from it? What deliverables will I see? Well, you'll be able to manage sales leads from start to finish now in one place. You'll provide accurate reporting and on campaign effectiveness and prioritize sales queues. So that's just a very quick example of coming up with a vision box that has the front, the back, and it covers the vision statement, what it is, why we're doing it, and what is it that we're actually going to be delivering at a high level. The next part that you need to do as part of idea qualification is come up with clear definition of done at the project level. Some people call it conditions of satisfaction, and some people call it the project's definition of done or acceptance criteria. This could include a lot of different things, but the most important thing is it's measurable. So let me show you an example. Let's say that one of their goals was elimination of dual entry. That was one of their objectives. So now you should tie your objectives to actual measures. So if you want to eliminate dual entry, the gist of that is we want to have one place to enter and track sales lead information. That's really what they're saying they want to do. And how we can measure that is using cycle time. Cycle time means the beginning and the end of something. So from the very beginning of entering in a lead and then finding that record all the way to finding the record back and searching for it, that's basically the cycle time that we're looking for. So I've entered a lead and I've searched for and brought that lead back. That's the beginning to end. We want to reduce it from right now, it takes about 10 minutes to do that. We want to reduce it to about 2 minutes. That's our goal. If we can get it down to 2 minutes so that they're not running between too many different systems, that it's all pretty simple to do, that's awesome. The stretch means like the top goal would be if it takes less than 2 minutes. If, it just takes a minute or even less than a minute for you to enter a lead and bring it back, that would be awesome. And we have completely failed if it takes greater than 5 minutes. So this is a very quick example of taking an objective from your project, finding out what is the gist of that objective, what is it that you're really trying to do and track. How are you actually going to measure that? What would be the metric? And then coming up with some target stretch and failures. Another example that I'm showing you at the bottom over here is usability. Improving usability means that I want to really measure how easy will it be for a sales rep to be trained on this new system. And what I'm going to measure is the time required to train a typical sales rep to go through the entry process. If it takes me less than 2 minutes of training, we're good to go. If it takes me 0 training, that's our stretch goal. That would be awesome, right? That's like we're above our goals now. If you're sitting around fiddling with the salesperson for 10 minutes trying to explain to them how they're going to get through the sales process, then you've definitely failed. So again, take this slide as an example of how you can take measures and translate measures into actual goals and deliverables that are easy. Your objectives, sorry. So common problems with idea qualification, and you guys know a lot about this. A lot of times we don't do it. I don't know why we don't do it. You can start to chat right now real quickly and say, why don't we do it? Why do we skip all this? Why are we so in a hurry to just get things done and work on projects that are very costly? So another problem is we use the WSTL method for qualification. If no one knows what that is, it's the who screams the loudest method. Who screams the loudest means, the VP with the highest voice, the person who's got the biggest argument, usually is the person that wins for their idea. This will be great equals ROI qualification. This is my favorite. So instead of justifying the ROI, you're basically just saying, it's just going to be great. We should do this project. We're going to improve customer satisfaction. It's going to be just so awesome to do. We know this is going to be valuable. That's all nice and great, but how do you prove that? You got to put some numbers behind what you're saying, because we're about to spend millions of dollars on this. Domination of lack of participation. Sometimes, again, like we said, some people, some managers, some leaders are very strong personalities, and so they'll dominate, and so they'll always get their ideas through. And unfortunately, some other people just completely disconnect and don't participate, and so they don't get their part through. So maybe it's a poor operational department, and they'll just never be able to justify. Inconsistency. Some of our teams do it, some don't do it. So some projects go through idea qualification, other ones don't. So again, contribute to the community right now in your chat box. What do you think are some of the problems of why we don't do this? Some of the root causes that you should know about that at least I've investigated from a lot of organizations is there's no single point of entry for ideas. If you don't have one place where all of your ideas come through, it's pretty hard to qualify them. If people are just calling randomly, walking by at a manager's office and getting something approved, managers themselves coming up with their own pet projects and asking the teams to get them done, a business person has a great friendship with one of the developers and just walks by, you have 4 or 5 different portfolio management strategies and ways, and so there's really no one way to identify where is all this work coming from, then of course it's going to be hard to qualify it. So that's the first thing you need to start looking at. No formal step for this integrated with your existing processes. So maybe there is one place where all the ideas are coming through, but you have no multi-step process for idea qualification. And what I'm proposing here is just use that Kanban wall. Come up with your own checklist of questions that are important to you, and use a visible Kanban wall to track those, and just see how it's going. I believe in visibility. Anytime you can have visual information radiators, you're going to get a lot more adoption of it and a lot more effectiveness than if you're just using a fancy tool. And I'm not saying that you don't use fancy tools. I'm not saying that. I'm saying when you're first getting started and you want people to actually implement this new idea qualification, it would behoove you to have something visible in front of them, even though you might have a copy of it in your tool, of the actual process steps so that you can track it collaboratively with each other. Sometimes the process is too rigid. You might be in a large organization where the PMO has put so many thick processes around the idea that everyone just bypasses it anyway. They'll go find the exception route. So everyone's talking about their exception. So that's another problem, is the process that you've got right now is not simple enough to actually go through, so everyone just bypasses it and finds the workarounds. You might have an immature portfolio management practices. You might be actually small enough, or a medium-sized organization where you don't really have any formal portfolio management processes, so you just need to put a few of those in place. And of course, the Agile spirit is just enough to deliver value. Don't have the process get in the way of actually delivering value. The focus here isn't on the documentation on the processes. We're more focused on, are we actually delivering value? And of course, there are other root causes, and feel free to share them with the community right now that you're with. So some of the goals from project initiation, let's say we've got it through qualification and we're now trying to go through initiation. Well, here's the questions, right? These are the general questions that we were looking to answer. The first three, we've probably answered during the idea qualification. But now, what we're trying to figure out is, what is the cost, what are the high-level requirements, and what is the cost of these requirements? At a high level, what is the alternative solutions that we're looking at? What does the roadmap look like? How and well will we actually measure the value that we all promise that we're going to deliver? So project initiation has a little bit more detailed investigation, and more resources are probably allocated here. It's not the whole team yet, but you really are starting to investigate it and make sure that this idea is definitely worth doing. So some of the things that you finally, of course, there's a go, no-go decision at the end of this. Should we really do it? Should we not do it? And here's an example of the same Kanban wall, but used for project initiation. So maybe here's a backlog of 2 ideas that were qualified, and now we're trying to move it to vision roadmap. Did someone just say something?
Yes, Sally. Just wanted to know it's now 12:45.
Awesome. So we've got 15 minutes. Awesome. Thanks for the reminder. So the idea is initiated. There's 2 ideas that have been qualified, but they're waiting to be initiated. So now I'm going to vet out and make sure that the vision and the roadmap, and of course the columns could be whatever your process is, right? Just make them simple enough. Under every column you might have multiple questions that you're asking and you're vetting out. But just, take it down to like 4 or 5 maximum columns that you're really trying to track. And so is the vision and the roadmap solid? If it is, we'll take it down below the line, which means that we're ready to do alternative solution analysis on it. When it's sitting in this one, we're looking at buy versus build, vendor qualifications. Maybe it's a combination of buy and build. What are the various ways we can actually implement this? And once we vet that out, we move it below the line. That means that it's ready now for a high-level cost estimate. And of course, we call that high level because it is high level. It's not real. It's going to change, so just remember that. So we would vet it, do some high-level cost estimates, and then finally take it to the final phase, which is a business review. When it's sitting in the business case review, this is where the steering committee or whoever you have are actually going through that idea, vetting it, making sure that it is ready to initiate. They either pass it, they say, yep, we like it, we'll vote on this project is definitely worth doing, which means it's now approved for planning, or they kill it again and say, nope, this still doesn't feel right. We're going to be wasting time and effort. The other thing that they could do is just prioritize it on the backlog at a different place. And usually when they put it over here and they approve it, that is the next step. The next step is, don't just approve it. You have to put it in that vertical backlog. Where does it fit? Compared to the other priorities of projects and initiatives that we've got going on, where in this vertical backlog, and I keep saying vertical because I want you to imagine an actual top-down list, where does it fit? You can't just say go start on it now, because we can't start on everything. That becomes a horizontal backlog again, which is what we've been doing. From a requirement perspective, we did go through this in detail, but this is just a quick reminder that requirements have in Agile are either themes, and themes is like when we say we want reports, and a feature, sales reports, and a story is, as a sales representative, I want to see my actual sales reports for the last month. That's a specific report. When you're doing idea qualification project initiation, I wanted to clarify that you're probably going to stay at the theme and feature level. There's probably not a lot of reason that you have to go down to very detailed stories. That's usually what the team does when they're doing planning. When they're doing release planning, they take out those high-level requirements and they really break them down and slice them into smaller stories that they could actually accomplish. And of course, in Agile, which is different than Waterfall, we don't do the deep dive, which is the very details of a story, until 1 or 2 iterations before it needs to be implemented. Here's an example of that same levels of requirements with an example which is leads. Maybe there's the whole leads area. We want to manage our leads. As a sales rep, I want to enter a new lead. That's an actual story. And some detailed acceptance criteria is verify that duplicate leads, using the email, are not accepted. Verify that the XYZ fields are actually required. Verify that a new lead is associated with a sales rep ID. Those are the details. We traditionally in Agile do not like to get into that level of detail until just in time. Sometimes we call it the last responsible moment, and that is usually 1 or 2 iterations before it needs to be implemented. I wanted to give you a 6-step process for measuring value, and we'll and I'm gonna, obviously you can download these slides and download the cheat sheets also from the end. But we just went through an example of this, but you need to identify and confirm the strategic value drivers. So I needed to know what is the value driver that's pushing me towards doing this, and then align your project objective with that value driver. And then identify what can you measure, what's the metric that you're going to measure, and you just saw an example of that. And then go gather the as-is data. So you said you wanted to reduce duplicate data entry. Well, right now it takes 10 minutes to do that. And the easiest way to do that is just go shadow someone. Shadow someone and take a timer with you and time how long it takes for them to do something. Then define target measures, which is the 2B, which you want to take it down to. And then measure value. And so we've already seen an example of that, and here's just another example of value measurement. My strategic driver for the organization for this year, a really important bucket, is operational efficiency. And my project is going to automate the application entry process and reduce manual touch points. So the way that I can actually measure that is using cycle time for an e-application. From the beginning of an application being entered all the way until it's saved in my system, how long does that take? Because we receive about 300 applications per week right now, the current as-is, is that 20% of them take less than 2 minutes, 80% of them take 2 to 6 weeks cycle time. So that's the current facts that we've gathered. The target is that 90% of all these applications are getting processed in less than 2 minutes. And our savings that we think, the actual value, would be $15,000 per week, or approximately $780 per year. This was just another example of value measurement. Again, your value might be customer satisfaction, it might be something different than an actual ROI measurement. But it's important to write those down in this simple format and track them. Now here's the interesting point. All that sounds great, but are you actually doing anything with these numbers becomes the real question. You need to come up at the beginning of your project and as part of the idea qualification initiation, a plan of action. When are you going to measure? Who is going to measure those numbers? And who and how will you measure it? What report or what are you going to put as part of the requirements to help you actually measure value? And then you need to hold people accountable for actually coming back at the project and not close the project until the 3 or 6 months, whenever the date was, for you to actually measure value. That probably sounds too strict, I understand and I know, but I think we're wasting too much time on projects that might not be valuable, or we can't even measure value from it. So here's some example burn-up charts, and this burn-up chart shows you that we're measuring cost by iteration. The blue line is what we projected, the red line is what's actually being done, and the line above is what we budgeted, and this is being tracked per iteration. And here's a burn-up chart showing you points that have been delivered from one iteration to another. Again, if you're new to points, please go back and listen to the estimating and planning webinar. This is an example from my friend Mike Griffiths from leadinganswers.com, and he shows you like an EVM chart, an earned value management, but it's an agile version, right? So for every iteration, we're starting to track, it's almost like a combination of the two that I just showed you. It's cost and value delivered. So here's our projected progress, what we thought we were going to deliver, which is the blue line. And here's the actual scope that we delivered, actual points. And then the green is the money, what we thought we were going to burn, and this is our actual spend. What I love about his burn-up chart is, I don't know if you can see, but there's colors, and each color represents a theme or a feature. So you can tell now, just by looking at this graph, that we're done with the configuration and stock features, and we are starting to work on the sales features right now and almost done with them. So you can almost see the value that's been delivered just by looking at this one really awesome chart. Alternative solution analysis, this is just basically what you've been doing today. What are the options? I need to weigh them against each other. One of the things from an Agile perspective is we like for you to go see, watch demos, and research what other people have actually done, and really think outside your current box. From a sizing perspective, and I'm just going to show you this cheat sheet right away, best guess, anytime we talk about high-level estimation and high-level sizing, you have to know that's just a rough estimate. That's not real. I mean, you can't take those numbers and just say, we're going to hold you accountable, to the dollar amount. Those are just an initial guess estimate. In Agile, we like to do continuous elaboration of these estimates, right? So when the project first gets started and the team does some more detailed planning, they'll probably give you an updated estimate. And when the team begins to execute 2 to 3 to 4 iterations, they'll even give you a more updated estimate on what is really actually happening on the ground. Now, you can be blind to all of that. You might just close your eyes and close your ears and say, no, I'm going to go with that first estimate you gave me. Or you can face reality and actually see what the numbers are really telling you so you can adjust your plan. The complexity bucket method, and I'm going to just show it to you right now, is this. It's very similar to what I showed you with the business value points. And it basically says that because I'm talking about features now, like sales reports, or customer management portal, or the admin module, it's going to be very hard to size it at the story point level, which is what we've taught before in that webinar. You're really going to look for what makes one feature harder than the other feature. Is it the number of stories inside it, the number of detail requirements? If we know we've got 25 sales reports under the sales report module, well, that might make it a little bit higher from a story point estimate. How about the complexity of all the UIs in that feature? What about the business rules and logic? What about the data integration and the testing? As you walk through all these buckets, and there's an example of it, you can start to drop your features in one of these buckets of complexity, but it's at the feature level. Again, I only recommend this if the project is too large and you really need to come up with a high-level estimate at the beginning. If you can do detailed estimation at the story level, then it's much better for you than doing a high-level estimate because, again, these numbers will definitely change. So that brings us to our conclusion. I hope that you've enjoyed this webinar so far. I'm going to start looking at some of your questions right now. What I did want you to know is you can download this, the cheat sheets that I've mentioned from tinyurl.com/agiletraining. And you should be joining our lead. You're probably already part of our community, but I've just submitted my blog there for the new PMI-ACP in my experience, so please check that out. And we've created a specific LinkedIn group specifically for the PMI certification, so feel free to join. And let's go ahead and take some questions now.